You will marry Chike in 2 days, Adna's father said. His voice was final, as unyielding as the cracked earth during the dry season. Adana's heart plummeted. Chike. The poor farmer's son. The man who lived in a mud house and wore the same faded shirt every market day. She had hoped, prayed even, that her fate would be different. She was beautiful, with skin like smooth cocoa and eyes that sparkled like the morning sun on the river. She had dreamed of a love story, not a transaction sealed in desperation. Her father, Okeke, a proud but struggling man, had debts hanging over his head like a vulture waiting to strike. The village elders had suggested Chike as a suitable husband, and Chike, ever humble and hardworking, had agreed. No one had asked Adana what she wanted. Tears slid down her cheeks as she stared at her mother, seeking comfort, but Mama only turned away, her silence a heavy confirmation that this was final. What Adana didn't know was that Chike was not who he seemed. Beneath his simple attire and quiet demeanor lay a secret so grand that it could change her life forever. But secrets had a way of revealing themselves at the right time. And for Adana, the storm was just beginning. The morning sun rose lazily over the village, casting golden hues over the narrow footpaths and the small, mud brick houses. Adana sat on a low wooden stool outside her home, her heart heavy with the weight of an unwanted future. The scent of roasting corn filled the air, mingling with the distant chatter of women heading to the stream. Normally, she would have joined them, laughing and teasing as they fetched water, but today, there was no joy in her heart. Her best friend, Ifeoma, crouched beside her, eyes wide with disbelief. Adana, you can't just accept this. You're only 18. You deserve love, not, Ifeoma gestured wildly, her frustration evident. Not a forced marriage to a man you barely know. Adana sighed, tracing circles in the dusty ground with her finger. What choice do I have? My father says it is for the good of the family. He believes Chike will take care of me. But Chike is poor. Ifeoma whispered fiercely. How will he take care of you when he barely has enough to feed himself? Adana swallowed hard. That was the part that scared her the most. Life in their village was already hard, but to be married to a man who had nothing. How would she survive? Little did she know, Chike was no ordinary farmer. Beneath the ragged clothes and quiet demeanor was a man hiding a fortune, a secret he had vowed to keep until the right time. While the village saw him as a poor nobody, he was, in truth, the son of a wealthy businessman who had left behind a vast inheritance. As Adana sat there, dreading her fate, Chike stood not far away, watching her from the shadows. His heart ached for her pain, but he knew that soon, everything would change. Would she ever forgive him for keeping the truth from her? The day arrived too soon. Adana stood before the small gathering of villagers, dressed in a faded red wrapper her mother had once worn on her own wedding day. It had been carefully ironed, but no amount of smoothing could erase the years of wear. Around her, the women sang softly, their voices carrying the bittersweet melody of tradition. To them, this was a joyous occasion, but to Adana, it felt like a burial, her burial. Chike stood waiting under the large mango tree where the ceremony was to take place. He was dressed simply in a brown tunic and trousers, his feet bare against the warm earth. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held a quiet intensity as they followed Adana's every step. She barely looked at him as she was led forward, her hands trembling in her mother's grasp. The village elder, a wrinkled man with a voice as rough as the bark of an iroko tree, began the marriage rites. Words were spoken, kola knots broken, and prayers muttered over their joined hands. Adana's heart remained heavy. She had dreamed of love, of a man who would sweep her off her feet with promises of adventure and passion. Instead, she was bound to a man she barely knew, a man who owned nothing but a few goats and a patch of land. Chike, however, watched her closely. He saw the sadness in her eyes, the stiffness in her posture. He knew she did not want this marriage. And yet, he also knew that one day, she would see him for who he truly was. As the final blessing was given, and the villagers cheered, Jack reached for her hand. It was cold in his warm palm, her fingers limp. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "I know you don't want this, but give me a chance." Adana said nothing. She had no choice but to follow him home. Adana followed Jack in silence, her feet dragging against the dusty path that led to his home. The village women trailed behind, singing and clapping, their voices filled with a joy that she did not share. Her mother had given her one final hug before whispering, "Make the best of it, my daughter. A woman's fate is to endure." Endure. Was that all her life would be? A series of sacrifices, one after another, until she faded away like smoke in the harmattan wind. When they reached Jack's compound, the celebration slowly faded. His home was exactly as she had feared, small, humble, barely furnished. The mud walls were patched with dried palm leaves, and the only sign of comfort was a wooden bench beneath the shade of a mango tree. A single hen clucked lazily around the yard, pecking at the ground. Adana's heart sank. This was her new home. Jack turned to her, his gaze unreadable. "You must be tired. Let me show you inside." She hesitated, but with no other choice, she stepped in. The room was dimly lit, a small mat spread across the floor. There was a wooden shelf stacked with clay pots, a water jug, and a bundle of firewood in one corner. The bed was a simple bamboo frame with a thin mattress. It was nothing like the home she had grown up in, and even that had been modest. "I know this isn't what you wanted," Jack said quietly, watching her expression. "But I will do my best to take care of you." Adana turned away, refusing to let him see the tears threatening to spill. What kind of life awaited her here? She didn't know that behind the walls of this simple house, her new husband was hiding a secret that could change everything. The first morning in Jack's home felt unreal, like a dream she wished she could wake up from. The rooster's crow came too early, jarring Adana from the restless sleep she had managed to find on the thin mattress. The scent of burning firewood drifted through the small room, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she turned, and reality hit her. She was no longer in her father's house. She was a wife now. Sitting up slowly, she glanced around. Jack was not in the room. She could hear the faint sounds of him moving outside, tending to the animals or preparing something over the fire. For a brief second, she considered running back home. But where would she go? Her father had made it clear, this was her fate now. Summoning her courage, she stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, and the sun had barely risen above the trees. Jack was crouched near the fire, roasting yam over the open flames. He looked up when he saw her, his face unreadable. "You should eat," he said, breaking off a piece of yam and placing it on a wooden plate. "It's going to be a long day." Adana didn't move. She watched him, trying to understand this man who was now her husband. He was quiet, always watching, always thinking. He wasn't cruel or harsh, but he wasn't the kind of man she had ever imagined being with. Finally, she sat down and picked at the yam, eating slowly. "I can help with chores," she muttered, more out of obligation than willingness. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to." She frowned. "So what am I supposed to do here?" A small smile touched his lips, as if he knew something she didn't. "Live." Adana scoffed. What kind of life could she possibly live in this place? She had no idea that soon, her world would turn upside down in ways she never expected. Days passed, and Adana slowly settled into her new reality. It was not the life she wanted, but it was the one she had. Each morning, she woke up before the sun, fetched water from the stream, and prepared meals in the small outdoor kitchen. The routine kept her occupied, but it did little to silence the longing in her heart. Jack remained a mystery. He was kind but distant, never forcing conversation yet always watching her with those deep, thoughtful eyes. He spent most of his time tending to his farm, but Adana noticed something odd. he never seemed worried about money. Unlike the other farmers who struggled to buy even the smallest provisions, Czech always had enough food, enough supplies, enough of everything. One afternoon, as she swept the small compound, she noticed something strange. Czech had left early that morning, saying he needed to travel to the next village to buy new tools. But as she walked past his small storeroom, the wooden door was slightly ajar. Curiosity pricked at her. Hesitantly, she pushed it open. Inside, the room was nothing like the rest of the house. While their home was simple and bare, this space was different. Stacked neatly in the corner were bags of rice, beans, and yams, far more than one poor farmer should have. A wooden chair sat against the wall, its lid slightly open, revealing crisp bundles of money tied with twine. Adana's heart pounded. Why would a struggling farmer have so much food stored away? And where did all that money come from? Just as she turned to leave, a voice made her freeze. "What are you doing in here?" She spun around to find Czech standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Her throat went dry. Had she just uncovered something she wasn't supposed to know? Adana's breath hitched as she stared at Czech, her heart hammering against her ribs. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his face unreadable. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken words. I was just cleaning," she stammered, stepping back. Czech's gaze flickered to the open chest, the stacks of food, and then back to her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with slow, measured steps, he entered the storeroom and shut the door behind him. "Adana," he said calmly, but there was an edge to his voice. "This room is private." Her eyes darted between him and the chest of money. "Why?" she blurted out before she could stop herself. "Why do you have all this? I thought you were just a poor farmer." Czech exhaled, running a hand over his short, neatly trimmed hair. He wasn't angry, but there was something in his expression, something cautious, as if he were calculating how much to reveal. "I will tell you one day," he said finally. "But not now." Adana frowned. "Why not?" "Because," he said, stepping closer, "you don't trust me yet." She opened her mouth to argue, but he was right. She didn't trust him. How could she, when he was clearly hiding something? Silence stretched between them before Czech reached for the chest, shutting the lid with a soft thud. Without another word, he pulled a key from his pocket, locked it, and tucked the key into his pocket. Adana felt frustration bubble inside her. He wasn't going to tell her anything. He was keeping secrets, and she hated it. But if Czech thought she would simply forget what she saw, he was wrong. She would find out the truth, one way or another. Adana couldn't shake the feeling that she had just glimpsed into a world Czech didn't want her to see. That night, as she lay on the thin mattress in their small room, her mind replayed the moment over and over again. The bags of food, the stacks of money, how did a poor farmer have so much? And why was he so secretive about it? Czech, as usual, remained quiet. He didn't act angry or bothered, but his silence spoke volumes. It was as if he was waiting for her to let it go. She wouldn't. The next morning, she decided to watch him more closely. She noticed how he never seemed to lack anything, how he often disappeared for hours without explanation. And then there were the visitors, men from outside the village who came late at night, speaking in hushed tones before leaving just as quickly as they arrived. Something wasn't right. One afternoon, while she pounded yam in the backyard, Ifioma arrived, her face glowing with excitement. "Adana," she whispered, dragging her aside. "You won't believe what I heard." Adana wiped sweat from her forehead, narrowing her eyes. "What?" Ifioma leaned in. "People are saying Czech is not who he claims to be." Adana's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "They say he came to this village only a few years ago, with nothing but a bag on his back. But somehow, he has never struggled like the rest of us." Some believe he has powerful connections, others say he might even be a criminal. Adana frowned. Criminal? That couldn't be true, could it? That night, as Chike sat outside under the moonlight, she watched him closely. He was a mystery, one she was determined to solve. But the more she searched for answers, the more dangerous the truth seemed to be. Adana lay awake long after Chike had fallen asleep, listening to the rhythmic chirping of crickets outside. The night was cool, a soft breeze drifting through the open window, but her mind was restless. Ifeoma's words echoed in her ears. Some believe he has powerful connections, others say he might even be a criminal. She turned on her side, glancing at Chike. He lay peacefully, his breathing steady, as if he carried no worries. But that wasn't true, he was hiding something, and she needed to find out what. Slipping out of bed quietly, she tiptoed across the room and reached for his trousers, which hung over a wooden stool. Her fingers searched the pockets, heart pounding. And then she felt it, the cold, small shape of a key. The key to the chest. A thrill of nervous excitement rushed through her, but before she could pull it out, Chike shifted in his sleep, mumbling something under his breath. She froze, barely breathing, until he settled again. Slowly, she withdrew her hand and stepped back. She would have to try another time. The next day, Chike left early, as he always did. Adana waited until she was sure he was far from the compound before slipping into the storeroom. The chest sat in its usual place, its wooden surface warm but steady. She crouched beside it, running her fingers over the lock. She needed that key. As she stood, the sound of footsteps outside made her heart leap. She rushed out, only to see an unfamiliar man standing in the compound. He was tall, dressed in fine clothing, too fine for an ordinary visitor. His sharp eyes scanned her before he spoke. "Where is Chike?" Adana's stomach twisted. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just a friend. And from the way he looked at her, she knew he held answers to the questions she was dying to ask.